Good morning. As the candle has been lit for peace, take a moment to pause and say, yeah, peace. Peace, be still. And so as we think about what that looks like, there's lots of different things for me. Some are easy to reconcile and some are almost impossible to reconcile. When I think about peace, there's moments of us being peacemakers. And this Course of Beatitudes is kind of staples from where we are and our mindset and our processes. And, what would it be like for Jesus to see us as peacemakers? Well, that means we're children of His. That means we enter into what He's invited us to. And it's like, wow, I want to be there. That's what I want to do. That's the easy part. Wanting to be there is the easy part. But now being peacemakers are much more difficult, right? Just understanding I've talked a little bit before about point makers and peacemakers, and there's that. But then there's also just the idea of what would it be like in a world that is not currently peaceful to represent peace? What would it be like to represent a voice that calms the waters rather than stirs the waters? What would it be like to not be the antagonist, but rather just the calm, serene noise that brings tranquility? It's a hard thing to do when, whether you're talking to somebody in a grocery store, you're watching them be super intense towards another person over a mask or over how close they were or whether they sneezed on them, or I'm at a school and I see kids that are all in each other's laps and we're trying to say, hey, no. And how do I say that peaceably that doesn't actually destroy hearts and minds, but it actually say, oh, he's trying to do that because he wants us to just rest or just be peaceful and just step away. It's not easy. And just looking and thinking about our world right now, I often think well, what do I do? Do I follow this government stuff? Because I feel like, yes, I understand what they're saying. Yes, I realize this is actually quite important for me to do, and it will be a peaceful act of mine. I don't necessarily always understand why I should go back to school when somebody in my cohort of kids had COVID. I think maybe we should all be at home for my cohort. But the truth is, that's not what they said to do. Interior Health said something else. I don't think I agreed with that. But that being said, I voiced a small opinion to my boss. He said, this is what Interior Health is telling us. And I said, okay, I'll respect that. And I think part of what made me think that way is I was reading in Titus, and it's Paul, and he's talking to Titus, and he's about to kind of go to Crete and just kind of get some of the churches kind of online, as it were, kind of tracking how they would connect and how they would build community together. And the verse goes like this. It says, remind the people to be subject to rulers and authorities, to be obedient, to be ready to do whatever is good. So I had to think that through and go wait. I'm frustrated at Bonnie Henry, perhaps. I'm frustrated at Trudeau, perhaps. I'm frustrated at what all the world is going on in the United States. But I got to slow it down a sec. Let me just read that again for myself. And I did that. I said this, remind the people to be subject to rulers and authorities, to be obedient, and to be ready to do whatever is good. If in my protest and my frustration with my boss, I created two, fractions of people, or I was someone who was creating division, I don't think that's the good that Paul is asking from Titus to see in his churches. I think he's really saying okay, sometimes you're going to disagree, and that's fair. Should churches be allowed to meet if you can go to a liquor store? It's a good point. Let's discuss it. I don't think either side has to win in order for us to feel heard, right? I think at the end of the day, peace is okay to just sit and sometimes listen, right? It's not easy for us to do that because we all have opinions and they're birthed out of real emotion. However, it's not always our goal, and shouldn't be our goal, to create two different sides. It can be to create the same side who thinks two different ways on a certain subject. I differed from my bosses, but I still have a great relationship with my bosses, partly because they pay me, and partly because simply that's probably the right thing to do. And I withstood it, and it seems like things are good, and nobody else has popped up a case at school, so maybe they were right. But that still didn't calm my fears when it comes to my child. And like if Ezra gets COVID, like that's a frustrating thing for us. We don't know how he'll handle that, right? Even like little colds, he has a problem, and he's been called to the emergency twice. So yes, it's wars within us, and it doesn't often bring peace. But sometimes in who I'm mad at, I have to be very careful about what I say. The next verse is pretty clear about that. So verse 1 is there, Titus 3. And then Titus 2 says, but do whatever is good and slander. Yeah.
Can I get you done? Okay. And we're back on, and we're good. Whenever you're ready.
So verse 2 says, to slander no one, but to be peaceable and considerate, and always be gentle towards everyone. Okay, so then I have to rethink my differences, which still exist. My internal frustration with my bosses still exist. But as I read the second verse, I have to think through what my attitude is towards that person. And again, I get to disagree. It's not like we have to say nothing. It is that we have to be peaceable in that moment. So the word peaceable is such a strange word, because I know the peace part, but the able part is just such a strange, I don't know what it means normally, other than peace. So then I looked it up, and it is inclined to avoid argument. So not that you don't disagree, but avoid the argument, right? Avoid the tension that follows. Avoid, and it says, or violent conflict. I don't think I was ready to have violent conflict with anybody, but that being said, it's a good reminder, whether my protest becomes so anger, and you can be violent in your heart as well as with your hands. And so in having that sense of how much do I say in my internal process towards somebody, right? God sees my heart, so it doesn't really matter if I'm smart enough to not say it out loud. He sees me. And so in order for me to be a peaceable person, or someone who does not enter into willful conflict, but actually is saying, okay, look, I disagree with you on this one, but I'm going to follow what I know that Paul is telling us to do as part of people who are connected in the church of God. It's like, remind the people to be subject to the rulers and authorities, to be obedient, ready to do whatever is good, to slander no one. So, yeah, frustration around new restrictions, frustration around countries, frustration around, I like, first of all, I wasn't a super big fan of Sparks, of my little one going to Sparks. For whatever reason, I just thought it was a little crazy. And the amount of money I thought was too much. However, she goes to Sparks, and they're really good on most days. And so somebody in Sparks has COVID. So she can't go anymore. And then, is she exposed? She can't go to school anymore because we got to double check and have to go to get a test. And then what do we do? Like, there's a frustration internally in me that's like, I don't want any more Sparks. I'm out. But that being said, she loves it, and I have to try and find out what is my battle, right? Is my battle with the head Sparks lady who is literally volunteering her time? Or am I just going to say, okay, wait, let's stop for a sec. I'm no longer going to slander Sparks. I'm going to say, hey, they did their best, and a mistake was made somewhere, and at the end of the day, I just got to slow down, right? I got to be peaceable. I have to avoid the argument, avoid the conflict, and step forward into something different. Because that's what God's asking from me. That's how I show that I'm a person that has God in me. I don't get run over, and I'm okay to say my piece, but I'm not okay to make my peace so disruptive that it actually is no longer peace. We have to be people of peace, right? As New Testament's, Matthew 10, I think it is, just we're supposed to find our people of peace. And where would we find them in our society right now? Would we find it in the Christian church? Because online and in every media outlet that is, let's just say right now, American, and some Canadians that are jumping on it, I don't see peace. I don't see people flocking to those kinds of people to say, oh, this is a restful, peaceful place where I can sit. Instead, it feels like they're ramping everybody up. It feels like the opposite of peace. I don't feel drawn to that at all. If I didn't know Jesus and this was what I saw people that Jesus were like, why would I want to be around that? And that's the truth. They might be right. There might be a big distinction needed to be made about going and having enough people. If you can go to Costco and there can be 100 people, sure, you should be able to maybe think about having people in a church. I get that argument. But how you articulate that argument has to be people who are peaceable, not people who come across as angry, frustrated, give me my rights back. I need my rights. Because, I mean, when I think about it, some of the people that are the most vocal to me, my friends, don't actually go to church very often when given the opportunity, right? They don't think it's all that big of a deal. Oh, I'm going to miss these X Sundays, like 3 Sundays or 4 Sundays in a row. But take that away from me and, hey, give it back. I want the right to do it. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to. It just means simply give me the right. And that's where I think, okay, guys, pull back on this stuff, right? I can understand, like, the frustration. I get the argument, but I don't get the way you're arguing because it doesn't actually solve anything. The peace that you're trying to create because you find God inside of you is coming out as anger to everyone who doesn't know Jesus. And the point of us knowing Jesus is so that people who interact with us will see part of who he is. And if part of who he is this angry man who doesn't want anyone to take any of his rights and is so worried about all of these other pieces and these big overarching issues of like communism and socialism and the whole thing attacking us, it's like, well, wait, slow down. When Jesus was about to leave his disciples, he was really clear. He said, look, I'm going to go. Whether I'm here beside you or whether I'm in heaven, he said, look, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I bring to you as someone who makes peace. I'm going to talk about how that is important to me. So it's later on in John 14, and he's having supper with his disciples, and he's breaking it down a little bit, and he's saying, look, John 14:27 it is, peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Not as the world does, but I give it to you differently. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. So the fear that is created by, oh my gosh, here comes this big enemy of anti-church. Oh my gosh, the world is against us. Well, I mean, if you read the Gospels, the world has always been against anyone who loved Jesus. This isn't something new. And do you need to love it? No. Do you need to be angry and create more frustration and more resentment towards people that love Jesus? No. Let's read it one more time. I just want us to get this from him. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you, not as the world does. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. Internal peace is another thing. Being a peacemaker is one thing, but how do I gain it for myself? Inside my own heart, I wrestle. So how do I gain peace? Well, he said he's going to give it to me, so I'm going to get it. And I think we're really good at transaction. So if I give something or if I'm expecting something and I receive it, done. It's done, it's finished, I got the receipt, we're finished. But with peace, it doesn't quite work like that, right? So when it's peace that he gives us, yeah, he can give us peace, but if we don't accept it, if we don't slow down, if we don't calm down and actually process what it means to be peaceful or at peace or at rest, then we do not attain whatever he's given us. Whatever peace he gives us just gets washed away. And granted, we can say we got it and we can pray again and try again. And the truth is we do that often. And what needs to happen at some level for us is to say, stop. Okay, I know you're frustrated. I know there's a lot of anger. I have no peace if I'm talking about myself right now, I don't have a lot of peace. My mom just fell down, she broke her wrist, I can't go see her, and nobody can see her. She's got no one to connect with very often. That is unpeaceful for me. Is my son going to be exposed as a result of my school or even Sophie's stuff? every time there's more new restrictions. My son and my daughter are at a new school. They can't see their friends now because of COVID. I get that. Like there's no wrestling, there's no peace in my heart, to be honest. And I have the frustration of everyone who is not happy with what's happening. And so I read this verse, I'm like, oh, well, God's going to give me peace. Where is it? I don't have this peace. Well, the truth is I've never stopped and said, okay, here's my stuff and my issues and everything I need. And here's what God has, what God needs from me, and how I need to interact with that. And the truth is, if I treat it as an interaction, it will stick. Because I need to stop, I need to pause, and I need to let God help me react to my lack of peace. Help me be peaceable. And that means before I say something to someone that I like or don't like, or someone that I'm frustrated with, I let my interaction with Jesus affect that moment. But I actually have to have the moment first with Jesus. I can't just say, well, I have peace because it said in this verse. No, it doesn't work like that for me. We have to pause and stop and think, what does it mean for me to gain the peace that Jesus is asking me, that's giving me, he's ready to give me? I have to be ready to receive it. Not as a transaction, but actually interaction with him. I have to accept calm, peaceful communication between me and God first. I'm allowed to yell at him and be frustrated, but in the end, I really need to feel like, whoa, I've had a moment with God here. He's been able to grant me some of the peace of which he talks about in John. I think it would do us all really good to step back, have the feelings that we have, express them in a way that's safe, and yet still have that interaction with Jesus, which should bring us peace. It's not easy. I know I'm still wrestling with it. I'm still trying to find it. But I know it's there because he said it's there. And I know it's there because when I stop and pause, I can see. My brother went to Winnipeg to help my dad, and they've been able to FaceTime. Okay, I have a little bit of peace about that. Nobody else from Sparks actually has COVID, and Sophie doesn't have COVID. Peace. The people that actually had COVID in my school are back, and no one else has it. Peace. Sometimes peace comes after some time, but sometimes after an interaction with God that lets you mess with your frustrations, mess with every emotion you have, and still yet is able to help you bring peace. So instead of making it transactional, let's have interaction with God so that when we are meeting and affecting our world and becoming a presence for Christ in our community, that we're a peaceful presence. During this season, full of emotions, full of thoughts, full of Christmases that we have thought of before that are different than this one, I pray for all of our families to have peace and to be still.